and welcome everybody. The idea is for today to have a panel talk about the underrepresentation of female coaches in high performance hockey. I'm glad I mentioned that word correctly because underrepresentation is a difficult word for me to pronounce, but it's an important topic. And the reason why we are talking about this topic today has got everything to do with the coach that you are seeing on top there is Joy Jouret, who is a coach here in Belgium. She's played for the national team for many years. She went into coaching, coached both national teams in youth in Belgium, coached both men and women's team in the honor division here in Belgium, and she is finishing up a master degree into psychology, and this was the topic of her master's thesis. So that caught my eye, and I thought, okay, maybe this is a good topic for us to talk about. So the other coaches on the panel, so that I have to talk as little as possible today, we have Katrina Powell, a head coach for Australia, the women's national team. We have Janneke Schopman, former coach for the USA, former coach of India, and today coaching the national women's team of Germany. And we have, last but not least, Veronica Scott, Australian, who has had the experience of both playing and coaching in Australia, in Europe, and who is now the director of hockey at Colorado Academy in the US, which is a country with a little bit more different situation when it comes to women's coaching. So happy to have your experience upon that topic as well. The topics we're going to talk to you today about are what's the current situation of female coaches in high performance hockey. Uh, First, we have Joy paint that picture of the landscape of today. Uh, and then we're going to talk about what could be possible solutions to make this better. First, what can coaches do themselves? Then we're going to talk about, okay, from the domestic situations, what can clubs do? What can schools do on a domestic level? Next up is what can national associations do with their national team programs on the international scene? And obviously, there's also a role to be played by governing bodies like the FIH on a global scale, or Euro Hockey or Hockey Asia on the continental scales. And finally, we're going to take it back to the individual responsibility of what can we do to make this better. Um, okay, the idea obviously is to, first let's start with this one. What's the current situation, recent shifts or trends in that regard? So, Joy, without already going into the possible solutions and fixes just yet, your research highlights the significant underrepresentation of female coaches across the sport globally, and in the specific context of high performance field hockey. What does the current landscape look like from your perspective? And have you observed any recent shifts or trends? I think you are on mute. Is that
Yeah,
possible?
I had to start with the mute situation.
Absolutely. I will do the same.
No, it's a big question, so there's a lot to say. If we picture the current landscape, it's not very positive. If you look at the statistics, you see across all sports and for many years that we have a clear and significant underrepresentation of female coaches. And it means in all sports, in all different sports, all different disciplines, with of course some differences between traditionally sports that are traditionally linked to women, like gymnastics or something like that. Then we would see more female coaches. But for most sports, the situation, we go around 20% of female coaches. And if we're talking about high performance sports, and then we go between 10 and 15% of female coaches. So when you compare to all the advancements, all the advances we had as women for the last decades, and you compare it to the situation of female coaches, we see that there's really a systemic problem, that female are not going through the system for the moment. And if you look at the numbers here, the facts and figure that was made by the Olympic Committee, International Olympic Committee, you see that we stagnate. There's no movement. We stay chronically very low, and there's no significant augmentation in 4 years. It doesn't go higher. So the picture for the moment is not really positive. Of course, there are initiatives that are taken, but not enough, and sometimes, most of the time, underfunded. But the problem is, and we're going to see it on the next slide, is that the situation is linked with different layers of barriers. And that's an article that I encourage anyone interested in the subject to look at. It describes the environment, ecological environment of a female coach, and the different levels of barriers she can encounter. The first circle is made of individuals, levels or barriers. The second one would be the interpersonal, the third one organizational, and the third one, well, societal one. And you see that in those different layers of lasagna, you have things that do influence the access to a high performance position. I thought that was really strikingly interesting to have that picture in one diagram. And it's also interesting because every country has a specific context. And that's why I'm so happy of all the legends present on the panel today, not only because they are legends, but also because we come from different contexts. And it's interesting to have their perspective on how do they live those 4 layers. So that's the actual context. And just to finish with, the evolution now, well, that's my personal opinion. I don't have a crystal ball, so I cannot predict what will happen. But you see on the political scene that the backlash we're living now with, for example, the Trump administration cutting off research about inclusion and diversity, that's not a good signal. It had already had concrete impact, and it's not a good signal for the next 4 years. So yeah, sorry, it's not a very positive starting point, but so I leave the floor to my colleagues to comment on the question.
Yeah, so also for the panel then, and maybe let's start with Katrina here. Is also without going into possible solutions already and possible fixes just yet. So what are your experience regarding this from the beginning of your coaching career, and what were some of the challenges that you faced, Katrina?
Well, I mean, that's reflected in Australian high performance areas across the board as well, not just Olympic sports. For us here in Australia as well, the underrepresentation, not just in coaching, but in sport leadership generally. And so coming through for myself, I didn't have any female coaches. I just didn't have any. There weren't any role models. There wasn't any. Well, it's definitely if you can't see it, you can't be it. And there wasn't any of it to see in Australia. Certainly through the state that I came through, and at the national level as well. So. Yeah, it isn't just coaches in Australia, it's also administrators that also support women in those roles and help to employ them in those roles. So yeah, there's a broader picture, I think, as well, rather than just coaching.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Janneke, your thoughts?
Yeah, the irony is I did have a female coach actually when I first started playing at Rotterdam, and I think she was a good coach. She was also a former national team player, so maybe also tells a little. My experience is actually more interesting that when I started to venture out, maybe do I want to coach? I always wanted to coach, but do I want to coach high performance? It was actually reflected quite strangely by my teammates. So I had a lot of teammates that said, well, what do you mean you want to coach internationally or you want to coach in the hoofdklasse? I think I'm not sure I want to be coached by a woman. And I was like, okay, that's also interesting, right? That, you have teammates that just are used